Hello and welcome to the Hard Questions. I'm Solomon Serwanja. We are shaping our politics, especially as we go to elections. We're all counting down to the 2026 polls. Remember, it's your role and responsibility to go and cast your ballot to vote in your next leaders. And so today we are going to discuss our elections. We also pay attention to the biggest story of the week, that is the abduction of Robert Chagulanyi's bodyguard, Eddie Mutwe, Eddie Sebufu, who we commonly know as Eddie Mutwe. He was abducted. Later on, the CDF posted on his official account that he was in the basement learning Runyankole. Later on, he was taken to Massacre Court and he was seen to be frail with a lot of injuries. He will be appearing in court. Today we speak to a man who has been in politics, but also a man who has been the head of the army. Today we are privileged to be speaking with General Gregory Mugisha Muntu. General Muntu is one of the founding members of the Alliance for National Transformation political party. He is also a former army commander and a veteran politician in this country. General Mugisha Muntu, thank you so much for joining us once again on the show.
Welcome. My pleasure.
Certainly. We last had a conversation and we talked about a lot of things. The last time you were in that seat. Firstly, General, the big story has been abductions. The latest being the abduction of Eddie Mutwe or Eddie Sebufu. Later on, we find a shocking tweet from the CBF that he was in the hands of security officers in a basement learning Runyankole, according to his official tweet. And then he was found in Massacre. I really wanted us to get your thoughts. What do you make of these abductions, especially by the army?
Well, this regime sustains itself in power, basically using a number of tools.
Yeah.
But the most common and most effective, if I may say, is the use of money to rent support or to buy out people, and the use of fear as a tool for control. And as normally happens in all autocratic regimes, you have to keep on reinforcing the fear and increasing the extent to which you apply the tools of fear that create fear. Initially, you may not engage in a lot of negative activities, but the longer you stay in power, the more need for repression if you are going to maintain a tight lead on the situation. And that's, I think, where we find ourselves. And if they don't keep on acting the way they act, people can become confident. And the one thing that terrifies all autocratic regimes is a confident society. So when they arrest someone like Eddie and many other young people who've been arrested, it is consistent with the reinforcement of the state of fear, so that they maintain fear in the population and also fear in the different actors. So they simply can't stop that. And they have to keep on increasing it, because the more you apply it, the more people get fed up, the more people, a number become resilient, and there is a time when you can find the population saying enough is enough. Again, that's what terrifies autocratic regimes. The only way an autocratic regime can stop utilization of those tools of creating fear is if it decides and says, you know what, let's change direction, let's change strategy, let's now create an environment in which there can be fair competition. Before that happens, I would like to believe that even the worst hasn't happened yet. As long as General Museveni still wants to maintain control, and very well knowing that he doesn't have a popular base, now he has got to keep doing all things to maintain to maintain control through fear and through use of resources, compromise leaders, because that's another strategy that they use. Because when you compromise leaders, even when there's a deep dissatisfaction within the population, once the population finds itself leaderless, it keeps on, in that state. Hopeless, maybe angry, maybe frustrated, but when they don't have leaders, they are not able to organize, or it's not easy for them to galvanize themselves when they don't have leaders. Unfortunately, even when you compromise leaders over a period of time, new leaders would emerge. There's no situation where you find autocratic regimes sustaining themselves in power endlessly. There's always an end to it.
Yeah. I wanted to come in. General Muntu, you were an army commander for close to 10 years, 1989 to 1998. You were leading an army at that time. When you see the very person who currently sitting in that position you were in, years later, ordering the abduction of people from the streets, tweeting on his official account, proudly saying, we have this person, he's in the basement, he's learning Runyankole, being released with wounds and images and his head, his beard shaved. What comes into your mind?
Well, fear for the country, fear for what could happen, the future into which we are heading. Even during our own time, we made our own mistakes. There's no doubt about that. The situation was quite complex. We were fighting against 7 insurgent groups who were trying to stabilize the situation after a war of 5 years. We also had a lot of political resistance in a number of regions. But in spite of all those challenges, at least one thing that we had then, which is lacking now, is the sense of admitting where we made mistakes. If not publicly, but behind closed doors, we would know where we would have made mistakes. And then we would discuss and see how to rectify the mistakes, how to do things different. Because basically we're looking at the country. How do we build institutions? How do we establish functioning systems? And along there, we knew that there are areas where we would get challenges, like fighting insurgency is one of the most complicated ways of warfare. Even the most developed countries that have engaged in the kind of wars that like we're involved in. I mean, you can see like the American army in Vietnam or when it was in Afghanistan. Even when an army is sophisticated, fighting, carrying out counterinsurgency operations is one of the most complex ways in which armies can easily find themselves sucked into a lot of controversies. We were fighting on 7 fronts, but we had the humility to know the challenges we were meeting. And we knew that they were going to be military, they were going also to be political. But when we would make mistakes, as I've already indicated, there would be lessons to be learned, how to change ways, how to maintain discipline in the army, because another thing we knew that if there's a breakdown of discipline in the army, the country is gone. Now the problem, and internally, there are things when we would make mistakes that would really make us feel bad. Maybe if we didn't express it in public, but inside ourselves, because we knew that we had a noble cause, we were meeting challenges, also making mistakes, but we knew that the end of it all, the country would reach a point where they would start reaping sweet fruits from that process, in spite of whatever mistakes we would make, because they would not be deliberate. The problem now is that all what we see is intended, it's deliberate, it's conscious, it's by design. And what is frightening, it seems now there are officers who seem to be enjoying it too, and also conducting it with a sense of impunity. While in our case, when we'd be making mistakes, we knew that they would be making us vulnerable, because we wanted eventually to create a system where governance would be rooted in the will of the population. That's why now there is a contradiction. So we'll do a number of things as a way of it was a war of winning over hearts and minds. Even when we would make mistakes, and in the process of rectification of mistakes, and also changing tact, the target was winning over hearts and minds. We knew it was a very difficult process because a number of challenges was also rooted in history. But we knew that if we gave it our best, eventually we'll reach that situation where the population would say, yes, in spite of the mistakes that were made, it was worth it. Whatever sacrifices on the side of those who are fighting, on the side of those who had been defeated, that would reach a point where we would have a country where there would be justice, where there would be transparency in the management of national resources, where there would be fair play, where there would be no nepotism, where there would be equal opportunities and observation of freedoms and rights of people. Along the way, we lost that major end state that we desired to build. So there is, in as far as I'm concerned, there is no government that will never make mistakes. It's human to make mistakes. The issue is the magnitude, first, of the mistake that would be made. Two, the motive behind. Was it deliberate? Was it conscious? Was it by design? Or was it a mistake, even when people were trying to do things, in good faith? Yeah. Those are critical. What is frightening now, all the things that are happening are by design.
Yeah. I wanted to come in. You've talked about that you built this army and created disciplinary measures within the army that even when mistakes were made, there was a degree of accountability. You would have internal conversations and, flash a spotlight into yourselves. Remind yourself why you were fighting. I was told that sometimes they would even execute soldiers for some of those mistakes that were done.
Yes.
Rape and all those grave mistakes. People, soldiers would be shot down to act as an example. There was a degree of discipline that was within the army, and that's a firm foundation that you laid. But this is not what you see now.
Yeah, because at that time the focus was...
Now you're seeing the very people who are supposed to enforce that discipline, are they doing contrary to what you actually set up?
It's absolutely... I just simply can't even understand how a CDF can act in the manner in which General Muhoozi acts, and then the commander-in-chief just simply doesn't act. It just simply baffles me. But then it is really a reflection of the absolute shift from what we originally intended to do and now. Because now the main intention is how the regime can hang on to power. Maybe then it was still in its nascent stages at the top by General Museveni, but the rank and file, our main focus was how to build an army as an institution. How do we ensure that the army is absolutely disciplined and also becomes a foundation for stability in the country, regardless of which government is in power? Because we also knew that the government would change. And that's why we were very active in behind the scenes and in some cases direct when the constitution was being written to have a term limits clause in the constitution. Because we knew that, there's a time when we would now have to shift from the earlier practice where once we took power, because NRM and NRA were linked. We actively discussed that, and some of us insisted that there must be a delinkage. The first thing we started off with was the name itself, because we didn't want ourselves to be continuously seen as
NRA.
A wing of a political movement.
Correct.
There was intense
conversations.
Not only discussions, but even in the CA itself. There are senior leaders. I remember the one who was leading the charge to maintain NRA was the Minister of Defense then. And we, on our side, were saying, no, change name. We need change from being National Resistance Army to Uganda People's Defense Forces. At least at a formal level, change the name, and then start working on the practical aspects of ensuring that the army becomes professional, becomes non-partisan, which has not been achieved yet, because there is still contention. There are those who want to use the army as a tool of, one, creating fear, sustaining that fear, so that they maintain a hold on to power, which is unsustainable, definitely.
General, you had an opportunity of serving in this army. You joined the struggle. You were reporting to General Museveni at that time for 10 years.
Yes.
I would love to believe you know him to an extent. You know him partly in the military. You were so close. You know what he stood for or what he stands for in terms of discipline within the army.
Yes.
What do you think goes through his mind when he sees these things that are happening right now?
I think he's conflicted. Because on one side, he would want to see a disciplined army. But on the other side, he wants to hang on to power. The two are in conflict. Because for him to hang on to power, he must do what he does with the army and intelligence services and police. He must misuse them for purposes of control, creating fear, so that he can sustain himself in power. So, on the balance of factors, that's more important to him. Hang on to power is more important than anything else. While he may have a desire to see a disciplined force, there's no way you can use a disciplined force to do the things that they do. For example, in elections, in general elections, in by-elections. He abuses those institutions, abuses his power. Because hang on to power to him is the topmost consideration over everything else. Mm-hmm. So in that regard, until he still wants to hang on to power, he'll keep doing the things that he does. Unless somehow he changed his attitude and said, okay, let me either two things. If he said, okay, let me influence the institutions and create an environment in which there can be fair competition, and then he participates. If he's willing to lose, and accept the loss. That's one option. Second option to say, you know what, let me create an environment in which I can bow out, but for purposes of leaving a legacy, ensure that there is a free, fair, transparent election.
Okay.
As I bow out, at a psychological level, you can see that he's not yet ready for any of the two yet.
Yeah.
So expect what is happening to continue happening, possibly even worse, as long as he still wants to come back,
So,
which he seems to be jeering for.
So, General, are you trying to tell me that General Museveni is pleased with what General Muhoozi Kainerugaba is doing?
If he wasn't, he would have acted already. I don't see how you can let CDF remain in office for a year plus, considering what General Muhoozi has been doing. One, participating directly in politics when he's still in uniform. And then the reckless manner of communication. The CDF position is a very, very sensitive position, more so in a country like this one, which is, not yet fully stable, really, when you look at the different factors. So for him to let the situation keep on hanging out there and him not acting, there can only be two possibilities or three. One, that's what he wants to happen. Two, that he would want that situation controlled, or he wouldn't want it to happen at all, but he's trapped.
What do you mean trapped?
By whatever considerations he may have, because I don't know. I don't know at the psychological level whether General Muhoozi being his son, whether that affects him psychologically. That's also possible. I don't know. Because unfortunately, leaders, you cannot take the leader into an environment where they would be psychoanalyzed. So we just keep on watching, and the situation evolves. Eventually, we get to know which of the different factors is affecting him. That is, if he wants to act, but he's still incapable of acting. Because the longer it takes, him not acting, the more it undermines the image of the army, undermines the image of the country, affects officers psychologically. Because all those generals active in the army know for sure. Those who don't know must have a problem with their thought processes or with their levels of analysis. They would know that none of them can do what General Muhoozi does, and survive in that position even for a month. They should know that. So you can imagine a situation where there is a CDF who keeps doing that, not once, not twice, not three times, but over and over, and they see nothing happening. They are human beings. So if you are a president of a country and a commander-in-chief, really, you shouldn't desire to have that kind of situation, or your officers, leaders of an army who make sacrifices as they do, many of them inside the country, others outside, serving outside the country, with courage, with boldness, with commitment. You should not subject them to that kind of situation. It's not right. It's not fair.
Yeah, and as a general who served in the army, or who believes that you were up to something at that time, you got out your pen and you wrote to the president. And I just wanted to read a tweet that you put out, and you said, "To the Commander-in-Chief General Yoweri Museveni, may I implore you to be guided by your own teachings over time about the recklessness of the past armies, that's the UA, UNLA, the consequences of their actions and impunity. You are the commander-in-chief. The buck stops at your door. Act. It is never too late. This came from a place.
The army is a very sensitive institution. It's the foundation of stability in a country. So for him to put, to relegate this issue as if it is a non-issue, I simply can't decipher why yet. I don't know. But best case scenario is that the situation gets resolved along the way, through whatever means. But it's not something that I think anybody should gamble at. It's not good to play Russian roulette in a situation of this nature. He may not consider it serious. I don't know what he's thinking. But he really needs to wake up to that fact. That it is absolutely, to a large extent, when you're in that position, like you are the president of a country and you let that kind of situation keep on and on and on and on. If nothing negative happens, we would all thank God. If anything happened in a negative, then basically it would be pointing to the levels of irresponsibility by the commander-in-chief.
General, the president has extensively written against torture, against beating of wananchi, against all these things, and yet this time he's deaf silent on this issue.
So I'm not able to decipher exactly what is going on in his mind. I just simply don't understand.
Do you think he's captured?
I think he's conflicted.
What are the risks of overlooking these things and just moving on?
Let me tell you, even all these countries, most of the African countries really, most of them have not yet built strong institutions and efficient systems of governance that are firm foundations on the basis of which governance can be conducted, government after government, even when there are changes of government. Most of them are still in a transitional states. But even in those kind of transitional states, I doubt whether there is any country around, even in the region, where a CDF would act the way James Muhoozi has acted, and the government doesn't act. I don't think that could happen. But let's hope for the best.
Walk with me in the corridors of power within the army. Scan through the generals who have built this army and made a contribution, sacrifice, and the men and women who serve in this army. What do you hear?
Most trained officers and men understand the implications of this. It's people who've never operated within the army who would have no understanding or clue. I see many of them on Twitter, They're like young monkeys that laugh at the burning forest, not knowing that actually the habitat that they live in is what is burning. We forgive them because they don't understand the critical nature, the central an army is at the core of the stability of the country. Any trained officer or man, more so like UPDF, where there are officers who are exposed. One, majority of them are well educated, majority of them are well trained, majority of them are well exposed to situations where they have seen failed states. Many have operated in Somalia, Central African Republic. Many see the problems of instability in South Sudan,
DRC.
In DRC. They know. They can't speak publicly. I recognize that, and that's how it should be. My hope is that at some point, there will be a way of how they can give firm advice in confidence, not in public, in confidence, the commander-in-chief. Somehow, they need to send a signal to him. Because this concerns us, all of us, 45 million people. It's also a concern for those who are serving. As I've already indicated, UPDF has got officers and men who really, in spite of whatever mistakes they are made to make, but in terms of dedication to duty to the country, they do their best. So you don't subject officers and men who prove themselves to the extent to which they do. Put aside the mistakes they make in politics. But in terms of defending the country or participating in the stabilization of other countries that become more or less failed states, you have to give it to them. So respect that. Act in a manner where they all recognize that they are equal before the law, that they are also treated similarly, not differently. Now, General Museveni may not recognize that, possibly, but he needs to understand that, because he's dealing with human beings, not robots.
Yeah. Last one on that subject. Do you think these issues are discussed at the top military organ? Where top military chiefs sit, and it's called the High Command, right?
To be honest with you,
I think it's
High Command.
Yeah.
High Command. I don't know. I wouldn't want to tell a lie. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But even if it's not discussed in the High Command, there are times when senior commanders can talk to the commander-in-chief in confidence. Now, the problem now is that the person who would ordinarily be doing that is the one who is actually causing the problems. Because ordinarily it is the CDF who would be talking to the commander-in-chief in confidence, say, we have a problem here, we need to resolve it. But when he's the one causing the problem,
doesn't General Museveni
then it creates a problem. Because I know that the number of situations where armies behind the scenes have influenced smooth transitions in countries, Kenya being one example, number of countries. But the officers have to be bold and confident. And there's a point where they have to put the country above self. Say, whatever consequences to my promotion or to my position or posting, this is now important for the country. So with respect, you advise. Behind the scenes, not publicly, you advise. The advice can be taken, it can be ignored, but you'll have done your duty to the country. Because you do that believing that it could save a situation that could be avoided. That happens in life. And that should really be, in actual fact, should be easier for those who serve in uniform, in the army. Because they go on fronts, and you don't know when you go in a battle whether you're going to come back or not. I mean, every time you come back, you thank God. Because you could die. So therefore, and they don't desert, they don't run away. They keep fighting. Different theaters, which basically shows that they have the courage. But then there's a difference between physical courage on the battlefield, or if some people like in the old when they would go hunting for lands and things like that, there's that form of courage. But there's also moral courage, where you face someone who is superior and you tell them the truth, regardless of the consequences of it. It has always baffled me. How you can have one human being
go before his general,
bold and ready to die for the country, and they fight, they be shot at times they'll be wounded, they go back and fight. But when it comes to courage to tell a superior officer and say, sir, there's going to be a problem in this, then the courage collapses.
I'll tell you why it collapses sometimes. I mean, that's the thing I was going to ask you, like, even with some of these people you say would love to speak to the CIC in confidence,
yes,
when they recall the past experiences, I mean, we've had big names like General Relu that
yes,
had the confidence of, speaking up, and we know what happened to him. He's now what? Advisor or something.
yes.
When you see such a thing, you think twice about, okay, in the past we've seen men who thought had courage to speak about some of the things that happened within. Eventually, we saw how the CDF spoke out against General Relu publicly on his official handle. And then ultimately, he's just put in a position of advisor. Then you're thinking, okay, who am I? But General Relu, who tried to speak up, ended up with these consequences.
So compared to death in battle, which is worse? That's the whole point. Because these officers, even those who, like now who are retired, but they are still for the 5 years they are in the reserve. If they are called upon to fight for the country, they will come. They'll go and fight. They've been battle tested. They don't fear. So if you don't fear death on the battlefield, why should you fear demotion or not being deployed? Or even if there was death in that respect, how different is the death? The death where you are killed by through unorthodox methods, and the death where you are fighting on the front. They are both death. So it's quite, when I was in command, when I would go visit units, I would ask the commanders down. If it was, the problem was the brigade commander, I would be asking the battalion commanders and the staff officers. And also those lower, like the company commanders. If there was, for example, short landing of supplies, say you go to battle every other day. You don't flinch. You don't run away. You don't desert. And you could die, because many die and we bury them. This one is buried. He's not going to be resurrected. But you still go. But when it comes short running of food or misuse of salaries of officers, you fear to stand before the commander, battalion commander, brigade commander, division commander, and say, sir, this is wrong. Why? I never got an answer. Up to now, I sit in the politics. It's baffling.
General, we're going into an election with an army that descended on the recent by-election in Kawempe, beat up people, masked up, beat them up, including journalists and opposition supporters, and nothing at all was happening. Like, no accountability, no nothing. And the response to that was rather alarming.
Part of the design to sustain fear. Because they know the moment they lose fear as a tool of control and manipulation of the public mind, they are lost.
So let me ask General,
They know they lose power.
what do you see as we get into this election with such an army which is going to, quote unquote, say they will be available once called upon as we get into an election?
Optimism is very, very important in life. Optimism and hope in life, in any endeavor. So those of us who are engaged in politics and in the change process, one, we must remain optimistic and hopeful that things could change for the better. But also be realistic enough to know that even if they don't change, this is our country. Nobody's going to change it for us. And keep engaged until this matter is resolved one way or another. When you read the current environment, as we talk today, you are talking about Kawempe just a few weeks back. The signals is that the situation is going to remain the way it is, or even become worse. But at the same time, we must keep engaged, those of us who are involved in politics for purpose of transforming the country, to know that change always happens. Most times you don't know when. And if you disengage, then you cease influencing the direction of where things can go. So those who are not sophisticated enough to understand that can easily give up and lose hope. I don't know, hoping that the situation will change by itself. By how? Can't understand. But nobody's going to fall from Mars or Venus or come from any other continent to come and resolve our problems. We have to remain engaged until we resolve them. Along the way, will there be problems that we would meet? Absolutely, yes. Yes. High possibilities of there being continuous casualties. That happens. Always. In wars, military, a number of times in political wars as well, if the environment would not have reached a level of high levels of political consciousness where there is freedoms and rights observed by a sitting government, ensuring that there is justice, ensuring that there is transparency in the management, for example, of an electoral process. Before you reach that level, you have to know that it is incumbent upon those who are still existing under that negative situation, that challenging situation, to change it. So we don't have any alternatives anyway. Those of us who want to have a better future, we have to remain engaged until it changes to the point where we desire it to be. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, do you think that the army should be involved in our politics as we go to the polls?
In what?
The army should be in the thick of our politics as we go to elections?
The army should not be partisan. The army should be, okay, we need to have officers and men who are highly politically conscious, but not partisan. Mm-hmm. You need to recognize that change happens. I know they know that. You know? And also those of us who are in the opposition need to understand that the army is abused. Many officers and men really detest how they are used, or how they are abused. There are those who like it, those who are short-sighted, those who are looking for promotions. You know, and therefore they are willing to do anything at the behest of the regime. But there are those who really would want to see the army remain non-partisan. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So much as we struggle and then they are used to met out the atrocities they do, many of them are bleeding in their hearts. You know? So many of them are actually captives of a situation. But the army being what it is, once they are given orders,
you march.
Yeah, they'll carry them out.
And
until a point, because that also happens. There are situations which keep on evolving, and not only the army, but you find even the population itself. There is a turning point, where the dynamics of change mature to a level where there is almost consensus, at times unspoken, but it's in the feelings of people. Those who are involved in, like civilians, yes. But there's also a time when that change process creates a situation in the army where the army takes a firm stand and stands by the population. That happens. Countries which are lucky, that happens. Countries which are unlucky, a situation implodes.
Do you think
now,
that,
in our situation, you don't know which direction.
That's what I was going to ask. Do you think that as this army in its current state can be able to stand up?
I don't know. I would like to give them the benefit of doubt. That's why we keep communicating to them broadly. Because every word spoken is a seed. So the more seeds that are planted in the minds of these officers and men for them to understand that they have got a critical responsibility to ensure that there is a smooth change, because change happens, the more that keep meditating about the words spoken by different people, the higher the likelihood that at some point there could be a critical number of officers who think alike and can act in concert.
Yeah.
At the point of need for them to do what the country requires rather than what any other individual requires.
And that's the thing.
I don't know how the situation will evolve.
I don't know either, but you were saying that the army shouldn't be partisan.
No, it shouldn't.
But you see, we're in this state where you have the commander of the army who says march east, and the army marches east or march west or south, being a son of a leader of a political party and president and standing for elections.
Yes. It's a very complex situation. I'm not just simply...
And someone who was tweeted out publicly, vote the NRM, Muhoozi, vote Muhoozi. Muhoozi is here to go, give him overwhelming votes.
I think
we find ourselves in that situation, General Mugisha.
Yes, we do. It's very complex. But on the positive side, looking at history, since creation, any of us who has studied history, and even as one interprets the current situation, one would need to have the hope from the understanding that change creates its own life, change creates its own dynamics. So as General Museveni sits back and doesn't act, as General Muhoozi breaks the law, they are not the beginning and the end. Change creates its own dynamics. The only thing none of us knows, General Museveni doesn't know it, General Muhoozi doesn't know it, I don't know it, nobody knows it, how with the dynamics that are created by change as a factor, constant factor of life, how will they unfold? And in which direction will they unfold? In regard to that, none of us knows. There are those who may think that they're in control, but they would just be simply dreaming, because I have seen many leaders who think they're in control. But when dynamics of change kick in, contrary to their own desires, it resolves problems.
Yeah.
Yes, I've seen that happen over and over. Anybody who doesn't learn lessons from that, they have a problem with their thinking.
Yeah. What a way to end this interview. General, thank you for speaking to us.
Yeah,
deep conversations happening. Last time we talked about what the future of this country looks like. So I wanted to ask you that as the last question. 5 years from now, what do you see?
I would hope and desire to see a country where there is stability, where there is equality before the law, where there is justice, where there are leaders who are fair-minded, even-handed, where, a young man or woman who leaves university with their certificate goes to any government office, very well knowing that if they have got their papers and they are the best in an interview, for example, that they'll get a job. Even when they know nobody, they have not paid anybody any money. That there is a business person who goes to the ministry and bids, and they have the best bid, that they can actually get a contract to do whatever they have bid for without paying anybody, without knowing anybody, because it is possible. There's nothing which has been done in any other country, as we see what I'm talking about happen in other countries. That can't happen here. They are the same human beings, same intellect. Only thing that they have, which we still lack, is just discipline.
Yeah.
And leadership. That's what we have to keep working on until we achieve that.
All right. Thank you very much, General, for speaking
Welcome.
to us.
My pleasure.
It's been a very great conversation. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching the Hard Questions. I'm Solomon Serwanja, and I've been speaking with General Gregory Mugisha Muntu. See you next time.